Okay, Rabbi Isai, good morning, everyone. Let's take a look at the screen. We started Yud Aleph yesterday. And basically, the halacha of Yud Aleph is dealing with shlichus. It's dealing with proxyship. And what are the rights of a proxy who is using the assets of another person and he's able to capitalize on those assets? So the general rule is that if a person is able to use someone else's money and capitalize on those assets, and goes above and beyond what the expectations of the dispatcher are. So this is really the discussion of this halacha. We said that in the event that the dispatcher hires a proxy and says to him, go take this money and purchase 10 widgets, and there's a fixed price, and the fixed price is $10 a widget. So he gives him $100. And then the shaliach is able to get, for some reason, 11 widgets. So the halacha is that they should split that 11th widget. That's because the shaliach did capitalize on the assets of the mishaleach, of the dispatcher. But as the Taz explains, the dispatcher is the one who was the cause of the shaliach being able to get this gift. But on the other hand, the shaliach may have used his own charm and charisma to be able to extract the gift from the seller. So therefore, really, they've both contributed to the acquisition of that 11th item, and therefore they should split it. And we said that that's only when it's clear that this 11th item that he's getting was clearly a gift. He threw it in knowing that he didn't have to. But let's say the widgets do not have a fixed price, and the shaliach is able to get 11 widgets through good negotiation. So then the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said, then you have to give everything to the dispatcher, because in that situation, it's not a gift, it's not a throw-in, but rather elamekach bezol. But rather, he says, but it's actually the guy is selling it for the widgets for less money, and therefore you get more value. Even though the dispatcher told him, you can get widgets at $10 a piece, and he succeeded in getting them for $9 a piece, nonetheless, he still has to give whatever he purchases over to the dispatcher. And this is where we were up to yesterday, that conversely, if a dispatcher gives a shaliach, gives a proxy merchandise, and he says to him, I would like you to sell this. I have a widget or a piece of jewelry or whatever the item is. We'll just call it widgets because it could be anything. He gives to the proxy, he gives to the shaliach a widget, and he says, I'd like you to sell it. If it's davar she'en lo shar katsu v'yadua, if it's something that does not have a fixed price, but it could be attained by some people could sell it for more, some people could sell it for less. Umachar biyoker mimasha omar lo, and the shaliach succeeds in selling it and fetches a higher price than what the seller had expected. Okay, hakol gora mazel hamishaleach. In that case, he's got to give all of the proceeds to the dispatcher. He can't keep some of the profits himself. Now, the dispatcher is entitled to be, the proxy is entitled to be compensated. He's entitled to be compensated for his efforts, but he can't say that in addition to what my compensation fee is for your consignment of this item to me, I'm entitled to take some of the profits because you only were expecting to get X and I was able to get X plus 5% or whatever it is. That you don't have a right to say, because we argue that this was a sale. And the sale, you were hired, let's say, to negotiate the best price for the dispatcher, but that doesn't give you a right, unless we stipulated otherwise, it doesn't give you a right to go in and take additional profits, even though the dispatcher was not expecting it. Okay, now this has many applications, even to real world situations, regarding someone who works on commission, someone who's a sales rep for a company, or someone who does purchasing for a company. There are some times when let's say a person is a sales rep for a company or a purchaser for a company, and in the course of making purchases or sales for the company, he receives a gift from a vendor. So who's entitled to that gift? Is the employer entitled to the gift, or is the sales rep entitled to that gift? Well, a lot of it depends. But the standard halacha would be, unless it was stipulated to the contrary, the standard halacha would be is that if it's clearly a gift because of engendering that relationship between the vendor and the company, so then the halacha would be that the sales rep and the company should share in that gift equally. If, however, and that's when nothing else is stated. So the sales rep gets 2 football tickets. He should give one to the employer and one he's allowed to keep himself. But that should really be stipulated in the employment contract, because you could stipulate whatever you like. You could stipulate and say that if a sales rep receives gifts from a vendor, either he has to surrender those gifts over to the employer completely, or he's allowed to keep those gifts. That's part of his commission. Another situation that comes up all the time is that what happens if an employee, because of his travel, accumulates, using his own credit card, accumulates airline miles as a result of his travel and as a result of his use of his own credit card. Is he entitled to those airline miles? Because, again, the whole argument is you're capitalizing on someone else's assets, even though you put in effort, but you couldn't have succeeded in doing all of that travel if it weren't for your employer. So the general theme of this halacha is that when all things are equal and there's been no stipulation, both sides have a valid claim, and when there's been no kind of stipulation in the work agreement, they really are supposed to split any of those kinds of gifts or fringe benefits that come to an employee or a proxy of that company. Okay, let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov, and let's see. Let's take a look. Sifkat Nun Dalet Elechetzia. The shaliach is entitled to half. Mihu im lo hirgish hashaliach b'tosefes. Let's say the shaliach was not aware that the person gave him an additional widget. He went to the vendor, gave him $100 and said, "I'm here to buy widgets." Gave him $100. Thought he was going to get $10, 10 widgets, and the guy put in an 11th widget in the bag. And all the shaliach did was he delivered the bag of widgets to his dispatcher. So in that situation, shayach hakol ha'meshaleach. In that situation, the dispatcher gets to keep it. He doesn't have to share the 11th widget with the shaliach. De lo zacha hashaliach shelo midas. Because the shaliach does not automatically acquire, he has to know about it in order for it to be a legal acquisition. Avol ha'achronim cholkem al zeh v'daitem dehol v'ikadas acheres makne zacha bo hashaliach gam shelo midas. But this is an issue of dispute. On the one hand, the shach says that the shaliach is not entitled to ask for a half of that 11th widget in that case, and some say that he is.
But I guess, Rabbi, the question may be, does the person who sent the shaliach out have an obligation to tell him, look, there was an extra one in here, let's split it, because he may never know.
Right, right. So that's part of the machlokes. It's the same. It's the same shaila, Paul. According to the first opinion, the dispatcher does not even have to inform the shaliach that he received an extra widget. According to the second opinion, he does, because half of it legally belongs to the shaliach. Okay. Ki ein hadavar yadua, because the reason why they split that 11th widget is because it's unknown. The way that the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said, he says it's not really known. Lemi nasan matanazu lahashaliach olam hashaliach. To whom was that extra widget given to? It's clearly in the realm of a gift, because the price of widgets is a fixed price, $10 a widget. Why then did I get an 11th widget? So it's a gift. But the question is, to whom did he give the gift? So he says, Kain hu shitas Rashi, lefi zeh im omar hamocher beferish hu nosim l'shaliach hakol l'shaliach. So he says, so therefore, based on this fact that you don't know who the vendor wanted to give that 11th widget to, they have to split it. But let's say the vendor said, at the time that the shaliach comes to purchase the widgets, he says, here's the 10 widgets that you paid for, and for you, my fine young man who is here now and standing in front of me, I like you so much because you really have such charm. I'm giving you this widget as a gift. So if obviously in that situation, the shaliach does not have to split that 11th widget with the dispatcher, because it's clear that it was a gift given from one party to another independent of the purchase. And it was explicit that he wanted the shaliach to get the whole thing. And it would also follow that if he said explicitly, this 11th widget, give it to the guy who sent you, because I want him to come back to me and do more business with me, even though the price is fixed on this item. So then it's clear. Then he has to surrender it all to the dispatcher. Okay, let us go on. V'yesh omrim.
So are we moving on to another topic? I just had one
Sure.
kind of related question on this. Does this have implications for wait staff in a restaurant who get tipped? I mean, is that part of, should they have to split the tip with the owner of the restaurant or not? Is that the same sort of thing?
Well, it all depends. It's an excellent question. I believe it depends on the convention. Normally people assume that when they receive a tip, they're giving it as a gift to the server. That's how tips got started, is that I'm paying the restaurant for my food, and I have a special hakaras hatov to the service that I've received from the service provider, the waiter, the wait staff, and therefore I'm going to give them an extra gift. There are, however, and I think therefore, because that's the convention, the employer does not have a right to those tips. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what I think that if there's like a tip jar, I think there was a whole controversy. I remember reading something about Starbucks, that they had tip jars at the store and they made the employees split the contents of the tip jars with the company. And there was a class action lawsuit. Maybe this was only in the US. It was a class action lawsuit, and the courts ruled that the employees are entitled to the full contents of the tip jar, because that's typically what people leave tips for. They leave it for the service, and they don't leave it to give back to the company for the goods that they've already paid for. Okay?
I guess I'm just going along the lines of, if it wasn't for the restaurant owner, they wouldn't be in a position in order to acquire those. So does, the fact that it's set up that way, I hear, and I guess this is more clearly for service, and you look at the mind of the patrons and say, well, what's their intention?
Right. Right. So based on that, when it's clearly indicated that the patron is giving that tip specifically for the service provider, so then you don't have this suffix. The Rav Shulchan Aruch had presented it as a suffix, we don't really know uh, who that 11th widget was meant for, so therefore they should split it. But when it's clear from the circumstances who that 11th widget was for, so then you give it to that party. And I would argue that that's the same thing with tips as well.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Rabbi, one further question. The way you initially presented the case is that you're supposed to buy 10 and the person who's doing the exchange gets 11. Is there a possibility, let's say, where it's not explicitly said by the guy selling the widgets that, he put an 11th? Is there no obligation, like let's say maybe he did it in error, either the person who was dispatched or the dispatcher would contact the seller and say, I just want to clarify, I bought 10, but there were 11 in the bag.
Yeah. So that's actually an excellent question, Alan. We're going to get to the issue of toes, of where an error was made. That's going to be a subsequent halacha. Here we're working under the assumption that the vendor knows that he's put in 11 in the bag. And it's clear, oh, you're giving me 11. Yeah, I'm giving you 11, even though $100 really normally buys you 10. I'm giving you an 11th one. It's clear that it's a gift. It's clear that it's an added bonus. The guy's in a good mood and he wants to do something nice for the guy in front of him. But again, this is where the halacha says they have to split it. It's also very possible that the vendor doesn't even know that this guy's a shaliach. It could be that the shaliach doesn't represent himself as buying on behalf of someone else. But nonetheless, he has to split it because it's unclear. Why did the guy put the extra thing in his bag? Was it because he was in a good mood and whoever would have come before him, he would have done it? Or was it because of this guy's cheery disposition and clean clothes that he did it? In other words, who gets the credit for getting the 11th widget? So that's the reason why they have to split it, because nothing else has been stated.
But it's clear that he's made some sort of statement like, however he's doing it, that he's adding something extra.
It's clear that he's giving him 11 widgets and not 10. They both understand that. In a situation where you suspect that the guy's made a mistake, and there's grounds for that, because normally $100 only gets you 10, you would have an obligation to say to him, are you aware that you gave me 11? He says, yeah, don't worry about it. And then he sends you on your way. So that's the case that we're dealing with here. We're going to talk about toes later on. In that situation, as we will discuss, there is a clear differentiation in halacha between whether the vendor is a Jew or a non-Jew. And we're going to talk about that because it's very controversial. So hold on to that thought. We will get there, God willing, next week. Okay. V'yesh omrim sha'afilu piresh v'chulei litem chetzia la mishaleach. There are some opinions who say that even in a situation where the vendor says explicitly, I'm giving it to you because you're such a nice guy, and therefore it's clear that the 11th widget is really being given by the vendor to the shaliach personally, and not as a gift to the dispatcher, but it's because he likes this guy who's standing in front of him. He should still, piety demands, and there's not halachically, but piety demands that he should give the half of it to his employer, to the dispatcher. Why? Because the only way he got it was through the being dispatched by this guy's assets. He says, Kenu shitas harif v'harash v'chein hiskim hataz. He says, this is the opinion of the Rif, the Rush, and the Taz. Ulam gam lefi shita zu hainu mishum deba hana l'shaliach al yedei ma'osrav shel balabayas. But the reason being is because I have to acknowledge that the whole way that I, the shaliach, got this 11th widget and I get to keep it is because of the good graces of my dispatcher who gave me the $100 to begin with. And so even though it's clear that the guy is giving the gift to me, but I have to have hakaras hatov that I would not have been in this position to receive this gift had it not been for the fact that the dispatcher gave me $100. Aval im omar hamocher lahedja shehu nosim labalabayis. So that's where the vendor said, I'm giving this to you, to the shaliach. So piety demands that he should split it even in that case. What about the opposite case? What about where the vendor says, this 11th widget is for your boss who sent you, right? Because I'm throwing in an 11th widget for him. Please tell him that I'm giving him an extra one. He says, in that case, everyone would agree that the shaliach has to surrender the whole thing, and there's no even moral obligation for the balabayas to share that 11th widget with the shaliach. Da'atu mishanose matana lechavero al yedei shaliach l'shaliach chelek bo. The argument being is that just because when I send a gift, right, and I'm sending a gift to my friend, and I ask for someone to transport that gift, does that mean that that transporter has rights to a portion of that gift? Of course not. So therefore, in this situation, an employee goes to make a purchase for his boss, and he brings $100, and he says, "Hi, I'm here to pick up 10 widgets for Mr. Smith," and the vendor says, "Oh, Mr. Smith, he's my good friend. Here, I'm throwing in an 11th widget for him." He says, "For him." Tell him it's on the house. So then everyone would agree that everything goes to the dispatcher and not to the shaliach. Okay. And the same would be true if the shaliach gets any additional fringe benefit as a result of his being dispatched. He should split those fringe benefits with his employer. Now, again, goes back to Paul's argument. Like, what about the waiter who is able to get tips because they're providing food from the restaurant? You're right, in a sense, right, that there should be a logical argument that could be made. But once the convention becomes that tips go exclusively to the employee, to the waiter, so then all other considerations are removed.
I mean, there's actually almost a third part to this, which complicates matters even more. If someone really likes the food at the restaurant, they might tip, but the tip is actually for the chef or for the back staff who are preparing the food, because that's what they really liked as much as the service. So I don't know whether sometimes there's a sharing amongst all staff of the tip, because it's not just the frontline staff that are appreciated, but also everyone involved.
That's true, although in a situation like that, you would expect the tipper to say, "I'd like to meet the chef, please." And they would call out the chef. In other words, yeah, it's true. You give a tip for a number of reasons, because you have an overall positive experience in the restaurant, the food, the service, but it has become convention, at least in North America, that it's understood that tips are for the wait staff to the exclusion of everyone else. If a person wishes to stipulate, I'm leaving an extra tip because I want $10 of the tip to go to you, my dear waiter or waitress, and I want the extra $10 of this $20 tip to go to the chef in the back because he made such an amazing steak. So then, of course, you have a right to stipulate that.
I guess it's so established now, because I think the pay for wait staff is almost reduced, considering the fact that they will be tipped. And maybe that doesn't happen for other staff. And so it's just part of the whole business.
Perhaps it's a consideration. Okay. It's all very good points. Okay. Ayin lekaman sif yud beis the ta'us becheshbon lo mikri sheba al yedei hamishaleach. He says, as we'll see later on in the next halacha, we're in Yud Aleph, when we get to Yud Beis next week, we're going to see what happens if the vendor makes an error and he throws in the 11th widget by accident. We'll see that under certain conditions, you're allowed to keep that 11th widget. But in that situation, the shaliach would be allowed to keep the entire widget for his own. because that's not considered to be a something that came to him via the dispatcher. In other words, in that situation, we would say that the shaliach gets to keep all of it, and we'll analyze that when we get to it. Okay, next. Then we saw, by contrast, that's all when the price of widgets is fixed. And the reason why the guy threw in the 11th widget is because he wanted to give a gift. But let's say the price of widgets is not fixed. And sometimes people sell it for more, sometimes people sell it for less. And when the guy comes forward with $100, the vendor throws in 11 into his bag. He says, here, it's $100 worth of widgets. In that situation, the shaliach is not entitled to any portion of the 11th widget, even if he wants to argue that I was able to negotiate a better price. He says, "Demistama avor hamos kibel mimenu nasan lo kach, shaharei ein lo shar katsuv." And the argument is over here, says the Imrei Yaakov, that since there's no fixed price on widgets, the vendor is selling the widgets because of the money. He's not throwing in an 11th widget out of the goodness of his heart. He's doing it because at this particular moment, he's willing to sell widgets for $9 a piece instead of $10 a piece, and that's why he threw in an 11th widget. And this is true, and the Imrei Yaakov makes a specific point of saying that this is even true if the shaliach wishes to argue that I was able to get him to come down in price on the widgets so that I was able to buy you more widgets. He says, even if the shaliach wants to argue that I was a great negotiator, it doesn't matter. Now, it may be true that the shaliach is owed a shkoyach, a nice shkoyach for having negotiated down a really good price, and maybe the dispatcher may want to give him a tip or whatever it is, but legally he's not entitled to any portion of that 11th widget, because ultimately it was the buying power of the dollar that was used to purchase those 11 widgets, and it wasn't a gift. It wasn't just the guy was giving an added gift. She'ein lo shar katsuv. If there's no fixed price, but when there is a fixed price, then they divide it in the event. And here we're talking about the latter case, where the dispatcher gave him a piece of merchandise to sell, and if there's no fixed price on that, let's say he gives him a piece of jewelry and says sell it, so then the shaliach doesn't get any portion of the proceeds, even if he's able to fetch a higher price. But if it has a fixed price and he's able to get, let's say he gives him a widget to sell, and instead of selling it for $10, he gets $12 for it. So then the shaliach is entitled to half of that profit. They split the $2 between the two of them. Mimasha Omar Lo, and this is true even if the dispatcher was only expecting to get $10 for the widget, and he said you can sell it for $10, and the guy comes back with 12. Nonetheless, if there's no fixed price for this item, he's got to deliver all 12 to the dispatcher. Rotzelomar, afilu im gila daitov amar lo litno bimana lo amrinan shemachal hamoser l'shlech. In other words, the point is, we're not saying that because the guy said you can sell this for $10, that he was tacitly saying that if you can sell it for more, you get to keep the extra. That's not what he's saying. Va'afilu hayodea shu shava yoser u'machmas doch gotziva limachro bezol afilu alchi amrinan delo hayadaito lahaknos lahashliach. And this is true if he's selling the item under duress. Let's say he needs to raise capital, and so he tells his friend, do me a favor, sell this piece of jewelry for me. It's a family heirloom, but I have no choice. Even though we know, and he says, but don't sell it for anything less than $100. And the guy comes back with $150. There is no moral or ethical obligation for the dispatcher, the guy who owned the heirloom, to give any of that extra $50 to the shaliach, because even though he was under duress and he needs to raise capital, but that doesn't imply that he was willing to give any of the extra proceeds to the shaliach. The shaliach should be shown gratitude, but halachically he has no rights in the actual profits of the sale. Okay, and we will continue this as we go along. There's more to see on this, and then before we get to the next halacha. But I got to hold it here. Any questions or comments, good or welfare, before we break it up?
Rabbi, just out of curiosity, the interview you're doing with your father on Sunday, will that be on YouTube or anything afterwards in case I can't make it at 1:30?
It's going to be at 1, and it's going to be simulcast on Facebook Live. So a recording of it will be preserved on Facebook. That's at least the plan.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Shkoyach, Rabbi.
Have a good
Good day of
Shabbos.
Shabbos, gentlemen.
Good to see
Well.
you all, and hopefully
Rabbi.
we'll see some of you over Shabbos at least. Maybe. We'll see.